Okay, so we're now ready to run the traversing program. Make sure that the stepper controller is switched on and that the red neon indicator is illuminated at the back, and that the USB connector is connected into the appropriate port. What we're going to do now is just double click this shortcut to Traverse2.exe, and you'll see that the program will load up. It goes through an initialization sequence and then gives you the main screen. What you'll notice here is that there's a button called Manual, which is currently active, and of course there's the Exit button and an About button, which just gives you a bit of information about RMS. Clearly, to exit the program, you just press the Exit button. You will, just as a word of warning, the cross has been disabled, so that if you accidentally press that, it won't shut the program off and stop the traversing system. In manual mode, you've got clearly manual control of the actuator, and you'll find that the screen is split into two parts. There's the radial axis and the yaw axis. On the radial axis, you've got a speed control, you've got a visual display of the linear position of the actuator, and you've got numeric displays of the current position of the actuator, and then you have a box where you can feed in the target position that you want it to go to. These are repeated for the yaw axis with a visual display and a numeric and the speed control. You'll notice also these buttons here. Enable will enable the motors so that we can then start moving the actuator. There's a separate enable button for the two axes. If you want to do them both together, you've got a button down here, and again these buttons are repeated down at the bottom. So if we just look at the radial axis first, we can click the enable button, and we'll see that the disable button, the datum button and the home button become visible. The first thing we do need to do after switch on is to datum the actuator, and what this will do is to move the actuator back out to its radially outward limit switch. It then moves forwards a little bit to find an index mark on the encoder, and then it sets its datum from that index mark, so it will be just clear of the microswitch. We don't need to set the speed to do that. The speed is automatically enabled from the initialization file. So if I click datum, what we will find is that the actuator starts moving, as you can see from here. Appears to be moving negative, but that's because it hasn't datumed. It's just datumed itself, and now it's reset itself back to 0, and the graphic here shows that the actuator is at its outer position. To move it in, we can set a speed, and I'm going to set a speed of about 4 millimeters a second. We can go up to 5 milliseconds. That's a reasonable maximum for this particular actuator. We can try and go quicker, but there's a potential then that the motors will stall because they lose power. We have an in and an out button, which are manual buttons, and it will move in providing the button's pressed. So if I press the button, it starts moving in. Release it and it stops. Press the button and it moves out. Release it and it stops. And again, you can see the graphic is updating to indicate the movement of the actuator. If I wanted to go to a particular position, I can type into here 20, for example, click go, and it will go to that position. And again, you can see the position is updated here. The target is also updated. I can actually drag that target around if you want to, so I can move that down to 73 millimeters. You can see that's updated there. When we click go, it then starts moving. And there you can see we've reached position. do remember that if the speed is set to 0, like that, the in button, although you can press it, nothing happens. The out button, when you press it, nothing happens. And again, if I make this 30 and press the go, nothing happens, all because the speed has been set to 0. Your axis is very similar. We can enable it, datum. Again, the datuming is on the anti-clockwise limit switch. Appears to be going negative at the moment, but once it touches its limit switch, it will datum itself. There we go. Although we're up against the negative, the anti-clockwise limit switch, the position has been set to -86.4 degrees, and again this offset is read from the initialization file. That angle allows us to set a 0 point so that we can increase the speed. We'll set the target to 0 and we can press go, and again it will now go to 0. And we can find that the axis is now mid-travel, and there are alignment marks on the yaw axis to set the 0 point. Reasonable maximum speed is around about 30 degrees a second. Again, you can move quicker than that if you really want to, but there isn't usually any real need to do that. So we can in principle, we could disable both the actuators together, both axes together. You can see there they're both disabled, or we can enable them both together, and of course we can datum them both together. That is basically it. We leave the actuators enabled. We can press cancel,